This is Brent.
And this is Amanda,
We are the Unreliable Narrators.
here to talk about the strangeness, the mystery, and the wonder of Young Wolfe's prose.
What is time?
What is memory?
What is a person?
Is this reality?
Where are we?
Do we exist?
Have you ever considered that all your choices are what brought you right here to this very moment?
Episode number 42, Mountains Like Mice, Part 2. First published in Worlds of If, May 1966. Included in the Young Wolfe collection, 1992, and Wolf at the Door, 2023.
Yeah. So, section 2. So, where we left is Dirk is following the pretty people.
Yes.
Because Othel has been kidnapped.
Yes. And he had to hunt a marmot for food and find water.
Yeah.
And then here we are beginning section or chapter 3 of this short story. So it took him 3 days to discover surface water in these arid lands required a knowledge of geology and a sensitive eye for slight growth and frequency and occurrence of the common desert plants. So he took him 3 days to find water, which we all know is about how long you can go without water. He had some in his flask before, but here we are. He's found water. He filled his flask and drank from a seepage where the Gerda and their prisoner had been.
And then he also gets some kangaroo rat stores.
Yes, so he chews seeds from kangaroo rat stores into a paste. So he makes basically like peanut butter from stored seeds, but with his mouth.
Yeah.
and he doesn't have a ton of water, so this isn't great. But he also eats some roots and other plants that he cuts.
Yeah, because it talks about him cutting off the spines and the skin so he can get to the pulp on the end.
Yeah, this sounds like prickly pear cactus to me.
Yeah.
Or some form of cactus. And then, some roots that he eats.
Yeah, kind of what I had been assuming it was, too. So,
yeah.
The trail ended at last in a sunken bowl wedged between 3 great peaks. 15 domed huts of flat stones surrounded the rarest of natural wonders, a deep pool of standing water. Outside the little circle ranged gardens where most of the desert plants capable of furnishing some article of food to gatherers were being grown under cultivation.
Yeah, so he stumbled across a little village here that actually has a pool of open water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the poor people may not be as poor as
right.
It's like in the desert, water would be a significant resource.
Yes, and they're gardening desert plants. Yeah, so he watches to see if he could get a clue as to where the prisoner is being held. And he sees nothing that indicates where Otho might be until it's nearly dark. Then a lone individual appeared carrying one of the long rods he knew were weapons and a small jug and hide bag. So he left one of the huts and began flitting up an almost invisible path nearly opposite from Dirk's position, his position. After perhaps a minute or two, others followed him unarmed and, so it seemed to Dirk, with the negligent air of gawkers everywhere. So it looks like here's the guy going to feed the prisoner armed, and then there's some others like just following along to watch.
Yeah, which partially makes sense. Like if you've captured an outsider, it's like kids or young people or just people who are done with their work. Oh, what's going on?
Yep, I'm going to go see it.
So.
Yeah, and so then he waits until they return to the village after dark, and then he climbs the mountainside.
Yeah, without the mountaineer's immunity to
acrophobia. Yeah, so he's lived in the desert. He hasn't been in the mountains before. He is hesitant about climbing this mountainside.
Yeah.
And he naively imagined, and I remember naively imagining this. He naively imagined that the peak of one of the mountains, which appeared so pointed when seen from below, would actually be sharp, a column or pyramid of rock. In truth, it was nearly flat, a tabletop of red sandstone about 50 meters by 100, with a barely perceptible tilt. So the mountains I'm accustomed to don't look quite so sharp, but you do feel like you'll you'll arrive at the peak and you'll know you're at the peak. But very often the peak isn't as all that perceptible as the peak when you're up there.
Yeah.
Because you'll be on one rise of rock. And is that higher? Is that little rise over there a little bit higher or not? I'm not sure. I have to go down this little saddle and go over there to find, oh, nope. Yep. This is definitely taller. So he climbs up the mountain, and it has kind of a flat top, quite a large flat top, it seems like, which is a desert mountain kind of thing to do. In the center of this barren little plateau, a single vertical stratum of rock rose to about the height of a man, as though a coin on edge had been embedded deeply in the stone. Only when the upper edge of this moved slightly did he realize that a living being was lying along it. He walked silently, crouching, but he had taken only a few steps when a calm voice said, "Walk wide of the pile of stones to your left."
Yes.
Yeah.
I like this because it's we're getting it's Master Alexander
Yes.
again, and we're getting him. It's like, even though he's chained up, he's just like, oh yes,
Be cautious of that pile of stones. Yes. It seems like Dirk immediately recognizes the voice.
yeah. He says, "I am chained here. Who are you? I've been listening to your climb half the night."
Right.
It's like, you haven't been being very quiet.
Right. But Dirk responds, "The retreatant you saw being stained when you came to our academy 6 days ago, Master Alexander." So Alexander maybe doesn't know who's climbing the mountainside, but Dirk knows who's chained there as soon as he hears his voice. "I had thought to find Otho, Master Theophilus's captive here. He was close enough now to see the bearded, intense face well with the starlight full on it. Master Alexander was chained on his back so that his face, when his neck was not craned to watch Dirk, was to the sky." Yeah, so he's chained to a rock on top of a mountain.
Yeah.
Promethean, really.
Well, ouch, my liver.
Well, yeah, so far we don't have an eagle, although there have been a lot of hawks in the sky, so who knows what might be coming. But yeah, he's been drugged to the top of the mountain and chained to a rock.
Yeah. So we're dropped into one initiation,
Yes.
and we're kind of getting it from Dirk's perspective. But now Dirk has stumbled on Master Alexander, who seems to have been forced into some other initiation too. We don't really know why he's chained.
We're not given the motives of the Gerda here. We get some hints later at what might be going on, but as far as "I am chained here until I can provide a ransom," we don't have any overt context for this.
No, we don't. And it's a lot of work to drag him up the mountain.
Yes. Yeah.
And chain him there.
They carried him across the desert and drug him up the mountain, and they chained him there. Yeah. So we find out Master Alexander asks him to investigate whether or not they can cut the chain out of the rock, because the chain is welded together, which means they welded them on him or welded it somehow.
Yeah.
Which is, that's some decent technology here. Portable technology, I'm not sure. So then the strategy seems to be that we'll cut the rock to get the chain loose. And so I don't think that we're told explicitly what kind of stone this is, but it seems to be some kind of somewhat malleable stone, like a sandstone type.
Yeah.
This is not basalt, because the knife is able to make an impact on it.
Yeah.
But the hole is so deep in the stone that Dirk is like, okay, it will take way too long to scrape the stone away in order to get the chain out. It's too deep in there. Yeah. So Master Alexander has another strategy.
Yeah. They talk about Hannibal
crossing the Alps. Yes.
And vinegar.
Yes. So this is so interesting because I've taught Hannibal's invasion of Italy before. Well, invasion of the Roman Empire. It's not Italy at that point. It's not Italy until the late 1800s, but that's a total aside.
Well, hold on. We haven't interviewed any Italians on this podcast, so their opinion may be different.
It might be. No, that's a fun thing. If you ever go on a tour in Italy, a tour guide will definitely ask you how long Italy has been a country, and they're trying to catch you out because, of course, Italy has been settled, occupied, has had a continuous culture of some sort or another for thousands of years.
Yeah.
The traditional founding date of the city of Rome is 753 BC. And that's actually well attested in the archaeology that there was settlement there on the 7 hills of Rome. So you have the sense of the ancientness, and you're in Italy on a tour because of you want to go see the Colosseum and the Pantheon and the Roman Forum.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was in the late 1800s that Italy became a unified country.
Yeah.
Before that, for most of its relatively modern history, post-Roman Empire history, it was a collection of city-states and not a unified country. So anyway, all of that aside, Hannibal crossing the Alps is a really interesting historical incident because the Alps are pretty formidable. What path through them would he have taken? He had a large contingent with him. How difficult would that have been? And how did he make a path for his gigantic army and his elephants through the mountains? And so part of the whole story is that they were breaking rocks with vinegar. And it's attested in the historical sources that Hannibal used vinegar on the rocks. And there have been studies done where they've tested stones and found acidic residue on them. So it's like, okay, well, maybe there was some, in the freeze-thaw cycle or pouring liquids in and then to have it freeze and crack rocks, but that would have taken a lot of time. So why would we have done this? What was the purpose of this kind of an engineering feat? And so what's a throwaway line in the historical sources is a source of modern curiosity. Like, why was he breaking stones? What stones was he breaking and how was he doing it?
Yeah.
So it's a active question.
I was trying to find this video
Okay.
last night because just reading this section reminded me of it. I watched it on YouTube a couple years ago, but I'm sure I'm not the only person that laments about the YouTube algorithm anymore. But
Oh my goodness, yeah.
But the video,
You're not the only person. Cory Doctorow wrote a whole book about it.
No,
It's not just YouTube algorithm. Inshitification, that came out.
Yeah.
Just came out, I think. So, yeah.
So they were interviewing this old. I think this was it was either England, Scotland, and they were talking about how they used to break stones in the old days. And so there were some examples out there where he's like, well, look, this is, big white rock. And he's like, this is where they drilled the holes down. And this is one that they didn't finish splitting. So then he started with a new rock and then he put in the wooden pegs and then put the water in. And so there's probably like 15, 20 holes drilled in a line on the surface of the rock. And then he's doing that and he's pouring water in. And
which is just what's described here in the story.
Which is what's described here. And so, and of course, through the magic of video editing, because he's like, well, you do this and then come back tomorrow,
right?
Type of thing. But they captured the cracking because they sped up the video so that you could see it. Now, of course, he was an expert at this, so I'm assuming there's some sort of you have to be looking at the grain of the rock, and
you can't split it just anywhere.
Yeah,
and you have to be able to drill this hole, right? Which is a fairly substantial undertaking. A hole in stone is not a small thing.
Yeah, and I guess so. To clarify, he had a manual drill where it was he was hitting, like it looked like a large peg and a wooden nail type thing, but then it was twisting as he hit it. And so then that was, and using that in and of itself is also a skill. So,
yeah.
No, it was interesting because it was like, here's an old technology, which feasibly could have been used by Hannibal. Like, if you have a Army Corps engineer, they didn't, not what they called them back then, but it's essentially the engineers that are attached to a military. Like, this is technology that they could have had back then. So,
yeah. So that's what Dirk does. He uses the knife to carve a hole in the stone. And while he's doing it, he's talking with Master Alexander and discussing this methodology.
Yeah.
So that first night, he can't get the hole deep enough for it to work. So there's not enough time the first night. So he spends the day hiding on the far side of the plateau. And here we get just briefly, he hides until the Gerda comes up and delivers food and water. And then, he comes out to help.
There is one thing. Let's see. The sun stood squarely overhead. When he had finished pounding in the stake, he had whittled from a limb of a dead tree halfway down the mountain slope. So he's found a dead tree that he's pulled the stake off of.
Yes.
I bring this up because it kind of ties in here in a moment.
I'm sorry. Can we actually skip back? I realize we didn't talk about the blue star.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. I was distracted about the Hannibal and the stones, but the whole discussion of Hannibal and the stones comes after we realize that Master Alexander has been chained to the rock to look at the sky, and he points out a blue star in the sky and tells Dirk that it's a planet.
Yeah.
That blue light, that's a planet. It's a planet, and it's what they've stuck me up here to see, so you can't blame me for getting a little excited when it rises. Technically, I shouldn't even point it out to you until you finish retreat. So there's some esoteric knowledge here.
Yeah.
So the Gerda have positioned him to look at this blue star planet, and then we're right back to worrying about the stone and the breaking the rock.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of, in my mind, it's like, oh yeah, no, we talked about that. It's like, oh wait,
we didn't. I mean, it is significant for the conclusion of the story.
Yeah.
So yeah. Shall we go back forward to the whittled wooden peg?
Yeah. So the Master Alexander told Dirk to be careful around the stones.
Yes, when he first walked up on the plateau.
When he first walked up, but we don't get an explanation.
No.
So now we do. He tells him to go over, look near the stones.
He knows there's a dish of water over there.
Yeah.
Dirk does, because the Gerda filled a little dish of water over there. Mm-hmm. He also left a flask for Master Alexander. And so Alexander sends him to get that water dish because we're going to have the water in the flask for us.
Uh-huh.
But then he tells him again to be careful.
I see the dish, Master Alexander, and an egg, a rock pigeon. The sun's high now. Look in the shade. Not until the third time Dirk ran his eyes over the ground did he see it. And then he was astonished that he'd not seen it at once. It was a lizard, legless or nearly so, whose black body was nearly 2 meters long, though no thicker than a man's wrist. Its absolute motionless as it lay in the shadow of a small ledge of the rock made him pass over it repeatedly.
Yes. So it's like, what is a legless lizard?
It's a
Brent?
Snake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a 6 foot long snake that's there, but because it's
the size of a man's wrist, no thicker than a man's wrist. That's a fairly substantial snake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he hasn't seen it. Yeah, that's just one of those things where you're like, oh man. So he's been working around this snake.
Yeah. But it's okay because Alexander says, I've had it under control ever since they put me up here, but I doubt if I could hold it if you were to step on it or kick a stone at it. With the simpler animals, reflex action is hard to stop. So now we're getting a glimpse, finally, of the master's control of animals. Mm-hmm. And Dirk is kind of impatient. I know, Dirk said shortly. Mm-hmm. He was, after all, a retreatant and not a freshman scholar. Is it so dangerous then? I've never seen one like it before.
So Master Alexander says it's a hamadryad.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I think so. Okay. That's how I would have pronounced it.
So and this is why I pointed out the dead tree on the slope, because there's potentially a dual meaning here, because a hamadryad is an old name for a king cobra.
Yes, but it's also the name for the spirit of a tree.
And so we get a tree that's dying on the side of the mountain, and it's the only tree he found to make the peg. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't sure if those were connected. It's very...
Well, it's very telling that Wolfe calls it a hamadryad, not a... Because he does describe it later, saying that they used to be called a something cobra. I don't know exactly where that line is. But he's introduced as a hamadryad.
Yeah.
Which it makes sense that the name for the spirit of a tree and a cobra would be associated with one another. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand this, Dirk said slowly as he trickled water from the hamadryad's dish into the hole above the peg top. It seems to be the sort of thing we were always told would be explained when we had made our great retreat. Weren't all the animals from the mother world brought in the Ark ship? I've sometimes wondered if the instructors weren't holding something back. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
We're not on Earth.
Yeah. We're on Mars.
Yes, we are. There's no secret. It's just that there are so many things for an undergraduate to learn about our own world, Mars, that we tried to discourage you from getting started on the endless succession of inquiries about the mother world until we're certain we're not wasting our time on someone who will spend the rest of his life planting mogwai, which is agave, right?
Agave, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're just going to be a farmer.
Yes, we're not going to spend a ton of time instructing you in the mother world information. We're just going to make sure you understand this world because you need to have that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then he goes into this. Oh, Dirk realized that the Master Alexander was trying to spare them both at least part of the agony of suspense that they must suffer during the hours of waiting for the moisture to penetrate them. Yeah, so the soaking, you described the video being, time lapse it because it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
But then they talk about the origin of their residence here on this world. So he wants to ask Master Alexander questions because this is going to be his only chance to learn if he fails the retreat because of this or because of anything. So he wants to learn as much as he can. I have heard it, he said cautiously. My father used to say, too, that if you looked into the sky at night, you could see the mother world. But I thought it was just a fable, like saying you could hear the bees of summer when you put a hollowed out gourd to your ear on a winter evening.
Uh-huh.
Oh, so good.
That's a good analogy there. That's a very striking Wolfe line.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And then Alexander explains to him that he's the descendant of highly, highly educated people. Well, your great-grandfathers, all of them were among the best educated men on the mother world. I can say that without knowing your family at all because it's true of every human being on Mars. So we get this explanation that who we're dealing with are the descendants of Mars explorers / colonists who came. They were the most highly educated people, experts in multiple sciences, because that's who you would send to colonize the new world.
Yeah. It's just kind of it's a very you have all these smart people, but then you have a breakdown of society. And we're not really given, so they are still dependent on Earth for resources, but then there's a breakdown on Earth, and we don't know, and I don't think that they know what happened. So either there's been a societal collapse, or there's been some sort of environmental disaster.
Yes,
but they've lost communication with Earth.
Yes, and there was a reference to it earlier. Oh, I can't remember where it was, but it was something about in the old times and before the loss, the great, so that they've experienced a loss. And I think we later find out that Earth abandoned the Mars colonies because it was too expensive to maintain them. So they're left there to deal with what they have.
Yeah.
So,
which, partially, it's I can't get it. What's the rover that's got the samples out there?
Yeah.
And it's they're prepared for pickup, but getting these tiny little, they're just these little vials where they've put the rocks in so we can, it's very frustrating because it's we could get them back and then we could have people analyze them. And this may or may not confirm life on Mars, but we don't have, there's not a ship en route to pick up the samples and navigate them back. Yeah. So it's just, here we have a minor thing where it's we have some prepared samples that in the future in theory, we're gonna go get them, but it's
but we don't currently have that figured out.
Yeah, and then it's in the expense for an entire. Actually, this just triggered a memory where there was the sign up for the Mars. Yeah, and there's the guy who it's he signed up because it was a one-way trip, and his wife and kids were like, why'd you sign up? And he's they ended up having an argument, getting a divorce over this.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's but it's Mars.
Yeah. So, they knew language, they knew literature. They each knew at least two, they were experts in at least two sciences, or they wouldn't have been allowed to come. And then Dirk is but if they knew all those things, well, when the Mars stations were abandoned by the mother world, they found themselves at the edge of starvation on a world where the maximum exertions of every member of the community were barely able to support life. So you had highly educated ancestors who lost their bodies of knowledge because none of it was worth anything, because just to survive took everything we had. This is such a clever, I mean, in some ways, it's a fairly obvious setup, right? Colonize Mars, and then the Mars colonies get abandoned.
Yeah.
But in another way, it's a very clever way of doing a sort of Walter Miller, Canticle for Leibowitz, decline, loss of civilization. We preserve some things, we don't have everything.
Yeah.
And it's not because of something that happened to Earth, it's because of the cutoff between Earth and Mars. And so, here you have voluntarily entered a extremely hostile environment on the premise of support from the mother world, and now you've lost that.
Yeah.
So within a few generations, we don't have much.
Yeah. Which, society's delicate.
Yes, people, please remember, society is delicate. Do not destroy it wantonly.
Yeah. But then also, too, I think people tend to get overconfident with their abilities. And so I think it's good for people to put themselves in different contexts.
Talk a little bit more about that. I like that.
Oh, well, so in my day job, I'm an IT professional. I'm an IT engineer. And if I go out hunting on the mountain, like, nobody cares if I can build a YAML file to set up a Docker swarm. Which
I'm guessing are legitimate things and not made up words.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But those things don't matter. Like my skill set is highly specialized in these very weird ways that I require significant amounts of infrastructure to be able to work.
The dependencies to do that are vast.
Yeah.
Everything from mines to clean labs to just the guy who sweeps out the server room at the data center.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's all this invisible work that goes into keeping me employed in certain ways.
Right.
But when if you go out camping, it doesn't matter. Like, put yourself in a context where you're unfamiliar, so you have to learn.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, can you start a fire? Can you cook something? Is your tent going to get flooded? Can you sleep without a tent? And it's just kind of moving into different aspects of life.
Right.
Like the number of times where somebody will, it's like, well, of course this is the interpretation of this work. And it's like,
right.
Well, that's your interpretation. Like, learn about ambiguity, like learn about how words change in meaning.
Right.
Like, a lot of people don't understand that language is living, and it's like they get locked in that prescriptive or descriptive methodology, and it's like, well, those are just two things to describe
the vast poetry of life.
Yeah. And they're describing two phenomena in language, but one of them's not, you can't just use one of them. It's describing something that's living.
Yeah.
And it's like, or go out fishing or go out gold panning. Like, those are different. Like,
I think that the inverse, but also it's the same thing that you're describing, where, the work you do is highly specialized and well regarded. Within its context, you're capable of doing things that not very many people are capable of doing. You're also talking about how it's dependent on other things. And so being put into a different context where your actions are not dependent on other people might reveal gaps or things, like bring you back to yourself in a humbling and grounding kind of way.
Yeah.
I think the inverse of that is also, so I'm in my life, I'm an educational professional. Blech. I'm really good at words too. And so I spend most of my professional life talking at people and guiding people through exercises and hoping that the work that I do results in internal changes that are literally invisible. For all of education's worship of metrics, and oh my goodness, the education world worships metrics.
Yeah.
You cannot measure growth. You can you can measure certain second order effects of growth, but you cannot measure growth, especially not the kind of thing that so the things I really care about and the things that I try to teach are less measurable, I think, than most. Like, I'm really passionate about, I do Socratic discussion development, Socratic seminar development.
Yeah.
And so the network of capacities that you're dealing with have so much more to do with a person's character and a person's intellectual capacity than with knowledge. And there are kinds of knowledge that you can very much measure.
Yeah.
But the kinds of things that I'm mostly trying to cultivate in people are so intangible. So in some ways, it's a relief to get out of my professional life where I am trying to help, living beings grow in an organic and living way, which is literally not like you can do good things, but you cannot control or measure most of what you're doing. And then just like, yes, this is how you fell a tree. Can you see the lean here? You see the tension provided by that? Do you see this other tree in the pathway? Have you calculated the slope of the land? Are you, so when you cut, a wedge at this angle and then start your back cut at this angle, the chances are that this is what it's going to do. And now there's still uncontrollable things here. It might barber chair or something and get out of the way but I'm having an impact on the real world. That saw cut into that wood and that tree is now on the ground and I can now cut it up into firewood. That's such a satisfying experience and kind of regrounds myself, away from the frustration of the uncontrollable and into the concrete. Well, there's some limited control I have over the world.
Yeah.
Or not cutting down a tree, like just baking brownies. I made something and now people are smiling as they eat it. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it takes all the efforts of all of the community just to support life. And they lose many of the sciences because those sciences are now not worth anything because they can't do anything. And then what does remain are the life sciences. So all of the scientific knowledge that would help them survive remains. And they use that knowledge to help the birds and mammals that they have and the plants they have to create a sustainable desert ecology that is based on the mother world but is not co-identical with it.
Yeah, so not everything was, they have a little bit of a conversation about that where it's like, well, not all the animals and birds could have lived here.
Yes.
And so we get the sense that, so this is like all birds, they needed to climb up on a rock.
Right, because we have a thinner atmosphere, so liftoff from the ground is not as workable.
Yeah.
And we're getting a hint here of what will show up later in Wolfe's works, where he'll be using the names of things, but given that we're in a futuristic context, those names may not exactly apply in the same way they did.
I was thinking about that last night with the word computer, because I ran across
Right.
that in a I forget what I was reading, but it talked about a computer.
Mm-hmm. And the computer was a person with a name.
Yeah, it was like
Yes.
a computer was the job title that they had.
Yes.
And it's like, now we're in this weird situation where it's like, computer means technology, and it's like there's a word that's morphed. That, I mean, whether you want to call that prescriptive or descriptive, like
Right.
something happened there.
Right.
And it makes sense on one level when you explain it, where it's like, a computer was somebody that took equations and they worked them out and double checked them.
Yeah.
So
A computer was a person who computed things. Yeah. And I mean, that just requires embedded contextual awareness, like, a whole world of historical knowledge contained in that one fact.
yeah.
Yeah. So then we get this context that the Hamadryad was one of the Gurd's animals. So now we're getting a little bit more awareness that the Gurd are a separate society that has their own separate possessions.
And goals.
And goals, yes.
So, yeah, so they've taken some harmless reptile, as
Yes.
Master Alexander puts it, and then they've read about king cobras.
Right.
And
And then edited the DNA.
Yeah, so they've reconstructed their understanding of a king cobra.
Right.
From-
So whatever the Gurd are, they have this capacity.
Yeah. And we don't get a glimpse into that. It's like, do they have labs? Are they doing like something that almost seems magic because of
some frighteningly subtle technology that functionally works as magic?
Yeah.
But
they're using it. They're using this recreated king cobra as a watchdog because people are unfamiliar with it.
Right. And then we get a momentary scene where the Hamadryad rises up and spreads its neck out. So you get this defamiliarizing description of a cobra, and it's focused on Master Alexander, and you get the sense that he's controlling it, causing it to do this, to show off. Snakes of the Cape on the mother world. Clever of them, wasn't it? And then, now see if there's a new crack in this rock. I think I just heard something. So that's the end of chapter 4.
Yeah. And now we're on the last chapter.
Yes, we are.
This one is fairly short.
Yes, and it opens with Master Theophilus saying, "The mountains are mice." Yes, I believe I did tell your class something like that once. I meant to allude to mice as experimental animals, of course. The mountains have been injected with all the viruses and vaccines. What? That was not what I thought of when I read the title, The Mountains Are Mice, nor is it what I thought of when I heard Dirk remembering Theophilus saying, "The mountains are mice," and it was a comforting thought. Full of viruses and vaccines. How is that a comforting thought?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think he misunderstood.
I don't live on Mars.
Yeah. Well, so then we get this funny... I don't know if you did this in college, but I took I think it was a biology class. It could have been a anatomy and physiology class where we did all the basic, this is how you extract DNA from bacteria. And
no, I did not do that class.
Okay.
For my science credit, I took astronomy, which was great fun.
Okay. Well, so one of the things when we were preparing some samples for slides, there's this dye, and it's a purplish dye.
Oh, to stain them.
To stain them. So you put the purple dye on cell samples before you put the little...
like a cover slip on it? Or?
Yes, cover slip. That's on the slide. And so then that helps you when you're looking through the magnifying glass.
Okay.
And so I was thinking about that as we get to the end here, because... Okay, so what's the only thing that's left? It's the life sciences. So then we have this weird initiation ritual, which is kind of like this mirroring of the life sciences, where it's like the meaning isn't necessarily in what it is, but it's part of these life sciences. Like it's a practice, or at least it was at the time. It's been like
who knows what we're doing now?
Over 2 decades since I've been in school. So I assume they still use this purple dye. I mean...
Yeah, I meant to allude to the mice as experimental animals. Dirk was scratching the spot on his arm, which he had on Master Theophilus's explicit order, swabbed with Otho's dye remover. It was beginning to itch. So it's revealed here that the dye is given to everyone. Every retreatant is given, or not the dye remover is given to everyone, and it is a contact poison, which in a large quantity will kill you, which is why we heard earlier, we didn't read it, but earlier in the story, there are retreatants that never return. And so I think Dirk's belief at the time, or my perception at the time, is that Dirk's belief is that they die because of their attempts to survive on the planet. Well, no, at least some of them probably die because they spread the dye remover on them, the quote dye remover on them, which is a contact poison which will kill them.
Yeah. Their society's so fragile that they can't have dishonest people leading it.
Right? So... That's so great. Can we just read that whole quote?
Oh, yeah.
Our society is too poor to afford cheating in its upper ranks. Do you understand? Like, that's, yeah. Yeah, so They're meeting with Theophilus 2 kilometers from the academy, where Alexander, in defiance of the normal rule of retreat, had arranged a night meeting between Dirk and Master Theophilus, clearly because Dirk has rescued him from the Gerda.
Yeah.
And so they're talking about what happened. And now we finally get the somewhat obscure explanation of what it is the Gerda are trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
It talked about where the Gerda came from. Yes, the Gerda were devised on the mother world to be the permanent settlers of Mars, while our forefathers were serving as investigators and observers. Couples who desperately needed money, as well as a few who felt they were advancing the human race, submitted to having their reproductive cells mutated. It seems strange to us who think only of the richness of the old mother world, Dirk, but there were many families there as poor as your own. Oh, if that ain't the truth. But they got along so well, they wanted to force us to go back to the mother world, sir? That's what Master Alexander says. Don't they know we'd do it anyway if we could? They want us to try a little harder, Otho put in. So the Gerda are trying to drive the full-size humans off of Mars because they've been specially genetically adapted to live there, and they want to get rid of the people. And from Dirk's perspective, well, we'd go back home if we could, but we can't.
Yeah.
And from the Gerda's perspective, well, if we kidnap them and chain them to rocks to stare at the blue planet, maybe they'll be more motivated.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, and it somewhat makes sense because they're non-adapted humans,
Yes.
Alexander.
These are descendants of the observers that were never meant to stay on Mars.
Yeah.
And the Gerda are the ones that this Mars was meant for them, or
Yeah.
they were meant for Mars.
Yeah, so this isn't about terraforming Mars. It's
about Mars forming humans.
Yeah, I heard this at Worldcon.
Okay.
And somebody said it. It's like, "Oh, this is a new and upcoming idea." And it's like, really?
Well.
Like, I mean, this is Cordwainer Smith's world. Like,
Yes.
I think Theodore Sturgeon has stuff about like Roger Zelazny.
This is the end of Out of the Silent Planet, where Lewis puts in the mouth of Weston the dream that he's like, humanity's going to spread to all of the planets. Well, if humanity's going to survive on all these other planets, humanity will have to be changed. It doesn't matter. We'll change man.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter to you if man looks like man? No, it just has to be descended from us. And that whole inquisitorial scene where the absurdity of just wanting some version of humanity to survive somewhere and to be willing to obliterate, in that context, it's about being willing to obliterate the native species of different planets in order to make room. Yeah. Anyway, so this is not that if whoever at Worldcon just needs to read it a little bit more.
I was
old
kind
books.
of shocked that if somebody it's somebody that I thought should have known better, but I don't remember who said it.
Yeah, so the closing here is so great. Our society is too poor to afford cheating in its upper ranks, Theophilus said gently. Do you understand? Yes, but I'm not sure I can accept as easily the idea of another attempt to fit humanity to Mars. You implied that in what you said a moment ago, sir. Would you accept it if the changed men were to be no less human than you are, Dirk? As the two of them were walking back to the academy, Otho chuckled. No less human than he is himself. Master Theophilus reminded him tartly that a fool should not speak. Right? So the problem with the Gerda is that
they have no heart.
Yes, the heart has been left out. And yeah.
And that was so I was reminded of the abolition of man.
Yes, men without chests. Yes.
I don't know if that's what Wolfe was working with here, because without heart, I assume it's what they're saying is the Gerda are about survival.
Yeah.
And they're not, like, they didn't adapt, like, all the cultural aspirations of, like, art and beauty and doing things for their own sake is what I was reading there.
Yeah.
That's
how I read it. That the heart, what Wolfe is using heart to stand for here is that numinous sense of humanity as a beauty-seeking, life for its own sake seeking creature, that we are creature, that nobility matters and honor matters and that love matters. And so, attention. And so if you are a survival based species who's like, okay, well, what do we do to survive? And then you are at the level of an animal and not at the level of a human.
Okay. That's the way I read it too. So.
Yeah.
Because it's like, clearly the Goethe aren't stupid because they've recreated the king cobra.
Right.
So they have the capacity to do things.
Right. To do things, but not the why, the passion, the inspiration, the beauty, all of the difficult things to talk about. What is it that makes a human human? And I think Wolfe does a good thing here by just calling it heart and not trying to delineate it.
Yeah.
Not trying to draw it out and declare that this is what makes humans different. But it is something of that attentive capacity, that cultural capacity that we don't seem to share, at least not very much, with other species.
Yeah. So then my question is, what's your read on Dirk?
What do you mean, what's my read on him?
Okay.
Like, what do you...
Let me stop leading the witness
here. Tell me what you think.
Okay, so the way I read this
Yes.
is that, would you accept it if the changed men were no less human than you are, Dirk? That's the question. My read on this is that he's been changed in some small way so that he still has heart, but he's closer to being able to call Mars his native home.
Yeah.
And then my read on, and then this is where it's like, two of them were walking back to the academy. Otho chuckled, no less human than he is himself. Master Theophilus reminded him tartly that a fool should not speak. So I feel like they're still, because it's like Otho knows more than I think a captive should know, or
Yes.
my perception,
Right.
from what Dirk has explained. Well,
it seems to me that the masters are like they are being, the initiation is literal, not, this is not just a ritual. There is something is being changed about them.
Yeah.
This is what is giving them their control over other animals, their capacity to move through the desert as they do. They are being adapted. And the impression you have at the beginning of the story is that this is a rite, a ritual of initiation, and then education will continue. But it does seem to be also, there's some other kind of an additional dimension to this transformation, which may be literal and physical.
Yeah.
I mean, I read this as, this is a Gom Jabbar kind of thing. Sorry, this is a second reference to Dune. But, like, can you endure a difficult trial with honor? Okay, well, you can be entrusted with the capacities that we have prepared for you.
Yeah. Okay. So I had read, I don't disagree with what you just said.
Okay.
But I think I leaned more on the
Funny way to pronounce I agree with you.
Well, you'll see.
Yes,
what I mean.
I know.
I leaned more on the Dirk had some genetic meddling done
Okay.
that he was perhaps unaware of.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I'm attached to a particular timeline here, but it does seem to be that, if Otho, as a captive who failed his initiation, he can still move through the desert like this and tame the raven, then maybe he has some of it's already in process. And the question is then the captivity system is a way of controlling that and not letting it get out. Okay. He's a failed initiate in some sense, but he's still a part of the system. He's just not going to be out to wander the world.
Oh boy. I was kind of almost leaning on Otho as kind of like a father and Neri type figure where it's like he's part of this and maybe even controlling more than he's letting on.
The captives are themselves masters of a different form.
Yeah.
And so they have to be disguised. Yeah, I could support that.
And then the last exchange in the last paragraph, I would kind of read that as, yes, there's real things going on, but they're kind of play acting and they're totally leaning into their
their roles. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. I will support that.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if I do like that Gom Jabbar though, where it's like because I could see that part fitting too. This probably comes back to like why we discuss these things like 60 years later.
Yeah.
Because it's like there is enough ambiguity, but there is enough like meat and substance there where it is saying something.
Yeah.
But it's not saying it in such a way that it's like, now let me didactically say, it's like, this isn't.
This is why I commented earlier the light touch of not delineating the reasons for the ritual. Like, so a ritual initiation is a cultural necessity for a human being. This is part of, we're having broad societal collapse in some ways, at least in part, because we have lost that possibility.
Yeah.
There is no longer a cultural ritual prevalent in Western culture that says you are an adult now. And you are an adult now because you have accomplished these things that are the markers of adulthood. Nor do we have any space in our society for you are a failed adult and you will not be trusted. We still do that as people, but we don't have a cultural framework for it.
Yeah.
And so for Wolfe to be like, oh, yes, an initiation ritual, it's just fundamentally true. And so by not explaining what the purpose of this initiation is, he is keeping a door open to the fact that this is just fundamentally human. However, in this particular context, this initiation has specific meanings because they have specific cultural responsibilities and goals. And so the general to the specific tension here is it's well maintained in the story, I think.
Yeah.
And I think a lesser writer or a more modern writer would want to come up with, an elaborate explanation of these things because they lack that cultural context of an assumed reality. Where Wolfe still, as an older writer, he still lived when there was still cultural contact with that concept.
Yeah. We lived in a higher context culture
Than we do. Yeah.
And I think we've discussed this before where it's like where you're talking about with a modern writer, they create worlds that are desperate to explain themselves, and explaining the world overtakes the story.
Right.
It's like they're people that are crafting stories that are unaware of the world they live in without explanation. It's like, okay, well, why are certain colored walls in historical buildings? And it's like, well, it's actually pretty simple because those are the dyes we had and pigments we had available to ourselves at the time. And it's like, why aren't some of them used anymore? Oh, guess what? We found out some of those were poisonous for humans. And,
that bright emerald green.
Yeah, but it's like, how many of us just go through the world without ever asking like, oh, well, why is that like that? Or, well, was there a reason we changed that? And a lot of times there are reasons. Other times there's really crappy reasons because something was cheaper and a company didn't want to produce this other thing.
Well, that's where we live in such a flattened culture because so many of the drivers for those kinds of decisions and so much of the driver for the pace of change is about, I'm just quarterly profits, blah, 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 private equity, blah, blah, blah. I'm very angry.
As you should be. But.
Yeah. Yeah. But then I think this also translates to an individual level as well. You talked about writers of stories and the worlds are desperate to explain themselves. That was a great phrase. I think this is also true of human beings. The less secure you are in your certainty as yourself, the less secure you are in the context and the context of your decisions, the more desperate you are to explain yourself. And so the more embedded you are in a strong context, the more rooted you are in your own belief, personality, and wider context, then the less you need to explain yourself, and the less you feel that urgency, and then also the more interesting the person is. Something floated across one of the digital platforms I've been on. Somebody's like, well, I have an uncle who doesn't own a cell phone and nobody seems to know where he lives. And he periodically shows up to family events but not always, and then disappears halfway through, and he's my spirit animal or something like. But that person that moves through the world so centered on their own, like, these are my limits, these are my desires, this is my understanding, I fulfill these responsibilities in these ways. They're not causing harm to people, but they're also not, no obligation to explain themselves, no sense that they need to justify their existence in the world. Something about that in the story. So
I think this is where, like, alchemy is probably a better understanding of science than the way science is portrayed.
Okay.
Because, and I think this is, we get a little bit of this in the story. Iron is iron. It doesn't care what you think about it. But, like, if you investigate and, like, oh, well, can it do this? Can it do this? Like, if you're patient with it and actually begin to understand what it is, it will reveal its secrets to you. And I mean, that's honestly, at the end of the day, that's all a real scientist is doing. Like, they're like, hey, this caught my attention because it was unusual or it was strange or I had a question about it. And 90% of experiments are quote unquote failures. They didn't get an outcome that you wanted.
Right.
But that lack of an outcome that you desired tells you something more about it. And we don't view a negative outcome as a success.
Right.
It's like, oh, you failed. And it's like, well, yeah, but I learned something new about this thing or this situation or this person.
Or myself.
or myself. It's like, and so that isn't, but you can't publish that. That's like, wow, I did 900 experiments and they were all a failure. And let me spin that into some publishable work in a journal. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't really.
Yeah. But even that whole pressure to produce something from the experiment, right? Like a publishable paper, like the need to do that it's just poison.
Well, it's
poison for knowledge.
Yeah. It goes back to your number of articles published in a journal is a measurable metric.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, like, as an educator, that's not what you're trying to get people to know or understand. Yeah. But this is like a secondary thing that we can measure.
Oh no, when I'm trying to recruit a new client or apply for a new position or something, improved employee satisfaction by 50% is something people want to hear. But what does that even, like, how do you even formulate a world into that? Because, what I actually care about, as I do some professional development, and when I'm working with a client and I have educators who are burned out and frustrated, and I provide them with a way of approaching their work that is more grounding for them and allows them to slow the frenetic pace of activity down and ask the one appropriate question instead of frantically trying to produce 10 questions, or that allows them to approach a classroom discussion from a place of genuine internal curiosity. Like, how do you measure that? Like, that's a real thing that really happens, but you can't put that on a chart. And I can't write that up in my resume. Like, I helped, so-and-so be more peaceful and contented in their work. Like, that's actually such a good thing to do if you can do that. Like, the days I feel like I have accomplished something like that are the days I feel most like a human being and most like my work matters. But yeah, you can't. Yeah. There's no invoice attached to that. So, yeah. Anyway. Any final thoughts about Mountains Like Mice?
No, I enjoy the work. Yeah. It's a shame that it hadn't been really collected before. I mean, it was collected in Young Wolfe, but Young Wolfe is itself become such a collector's item that I don't think a lot of people had probably read it until Wolf at the Door came out. Yeah, I'm glad it's available in Wolf at the Door now. It seems like one that should have been in a best of, but how do you best of Gene Wolfe? This is a problem. That's a multi-volume series. Maybe he'll get that, full 12-volume anthologized, like, it's all here, every story he ever wrote in order, with every comment he ever made about any of them. Kind of like the Theodore Sturgeon. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, that would be great.
So yeah, go read it if you haven't. Until next time, the Unreliable Narrators are Amanda Patchen and Brent Towle. And as Young Wolfe said, by the use of the language of sorrow, I had for the time being obliterated my sorrow. So powerful is the charm of words, which for us reduces to manageable entities all the passions that would otherwise madden and destroy us.